Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's LIC webinar. My name is Audrey Wittenberg, and I'm the Associate Director at LIC, which is the Council of LOMA that provides networking and resources, especially for small to mid-sized life insurance companies. Our mission is to help member companies improve performance through shared excellence. Today's webinar is Making Better Connections, How to Persuade Employees to Purchase Optional Benefits. Our presenter is Ron Neyer, Associate Research Director of Distribution Research at LIMRA. Ron has been with LIMRA since 1998. He holds the CLU and ChFC designations and an MBA from the University of Connecticut. At LIMRA, Ron's area of expertise is monitoring and communicating trends in workplace insurance distribution. He manages carrier practice studies, as well as research projects focusing on employers, employees, and brokers/advisors. He also conducts ongoing research that tracks the compensation practices of U.S. and Canadian carriers. Ron is a frequent author and presenter for industry publications and events where he shares research-based insights. He manages LIMRA's account management study group and has served on committees for both the Voluntary Employee Benefit Board and the Voluntary Benefits Forum. So Ron, thank you very much for providing your insights today. I'm going to switch presenters to you, and then you can begin.
Okay, well, you're going to get a hold for the video for 1 minute, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Ron Neyer, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Just want to give a quick introduction to LIMRA for those who might not be familiar. LIMRA is a worldwide research, learning, and development organization. We're the trusted source of industry knowledge for over 850 financial services firms. We provide our member companies with the latest insights and analysis on retirement, insurance, and distribution. Now, today I'm going to talk about a recent project where a colleague of mine, Yulia Babushkina, and I were tasked to explore why employees don't purchase optional benefits when given the opportunity. We were able to speak with them shortly after open enrollment for most employers had occurred. And before we delve in, I just want to share this short video with you, which will give you an overview of the project.
Not only do eligible employees often choose not to buy optional benefits, they are quite confident in their decision to do so. LIMRA recently talked with employees to find out how they make decisions. Through our conversation, many changed their perspective about their need. They also had thoughts on what types of communication might change other consumers' minds. For instance, providing real-world examples.
It needs to be relatable to, I think that short-term disability is not relatable to my life, and I don't know if I can speak for all, but people within my generation and where we're at right now. So maybe a way to try and spark specific questions.
And emphasizing that optional benefits are affordable.
So I would probably explain to them that, the cost is fairly inexpensive. I mean, you probably spend that much on Starbucks, and to save it, to spend it on your future, then, because you never know, expect the unexpected.
As for how they'd like to learn about these voluntary benefits, consumers had thoughts about that too.
Maybe do it in a fun way, maybe a comical way, like something funny and entertaining. I know when you talk about critical insurance, that's not really a funny topic, but maybe advertise it and market it in a way that we can actually be intrigued by it.
Ignite employee interest in optional benefits. It will pay off.
Now that I actually know what it is, I am interested in seeing what my job offers.
But now that I hear it, it kind of makes me wish open enrollment was still open. so I can reevaluate everything that I put down or what I really need to consider now.
For more insight and ideas, be sure to check out our full report. Contact study authors Ron Neyer or Yulia Babushkina for more details.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that was just to kind of give an overview of the study. And now I'm going to move over to the PowerPoint and we'll get into the presentation. Okay, so our research or our study, what we're going to talk about today, is based on an online nationwide focus group discussion we had with 44 consumers. All of the people we spoke with had access to optional short-term disability and or critical illness insurance. For each product, we considered 4 separate groups. We had one that focused on and talked to buyers, employees that did elect to purchase, but then we had 3 discussions with non-buyers, and we split them up into cold, warm, and hot prospects. And we determined that by their future interest level. We asked them if they thought they might want to buy in the future when they were before they even were signed up for the group. We just kind of gauged how interested they may be in purchasing later, and we use that to split them up into their interests. From these discussions, we identified some obstacles that currently impede the decision to purchase optional benefits. We also heard many good suggestions on how to generate more interest in these plans. So first, let's look at where we are right now with employer communication. As shown on the left, a relatively low percentage of employers currently offer various benefit options. Now, these penetration rates are for all funding methods, and they're based on employers with 10 or more employees. So if we focus more on the larger employees, we'd see these rates climb significantly. But still, even with a higher rates of employers offering, when these benefits are offered on a voluntary basis, participation averages about 25 to 30% for short-term or long-term disability, as well as AD&D. And then it plummets lower into the teens for critical illness, cancer, and accident coverage. So employees, like the man on the right, often decline optional benefit choices without giving them much thought. This is because employees don't understand the value of these coverages or their personal need for them, even though we as an industry think that benefits are essential for many people's financial well-being. What is the reason for this low interest? Let's consider some key factors that our discussions identified. First, employers often do not effectively communicate their non-medical benefits. The lion's share of their benefit communication strategy focuses on their medical and maybe their retirement plans. And it's hard to blame employers since medical benefits dominate people's benefits decisions. It's a driver of cost for the company and usually the first benefit that an employer introduces. So when it comes to communication, employers simply don't have the time or resources to look holistically at their strategy and identify gaps. We also surveyed brokers last year, and it seems like this situation might be improving at least a little bit. 85% of the brokers we talked to feel that compared to 3 years ago, employers want more help communicating benefits. And sponsors may finally be taking a long-term view of the process. 3 in 4 of our brokers see a heightened interest in employers deploying multi-year strategies. So the climate seems to be improving a little bit, but I still think we have a ways to go. Another contributor to low participation rates is employees' low overall knowledge of their optional benefits. The figures on the slide show how our focus group participants rated themselves early on in our discussions about short-term disability or critical illness before we provided them with any of the specifics about the coverages. So while the CI and STD buyers generally felt comfortable with their level of understanding, the non-buyers clearly did not. We also asked them a similar question about major medical coverage. The participants felt that they have a much better grasp on their health insurance, even though it's a more complex offering in most cases. But since they tend to use their medical insurance, they feel that they understand it, even if they just know, even if they're just scratching the surface and they really don't understand all of the nuances. They understand what they need to understand in order to use it and to go to the doctors as needed. So the employers focus primarily on medical and retirement plans in their communication, and employees initially have little knowledge of optional benefits. So when open enrollment comes around, the outcome's not expected. Now, for open enrollment, employees often have 2 or more weeks to make their benefit choices, but most spend less than an hour on these decisions. The lion's share of this time is spent on deciding whether they should change something about, you guessed it, their medical plan. On top of that, benefit decisions are plagued by inertia. Only about a third of employees make any changes to their current benefit elections in a given year. So if no major life event has occurred during the past year, they simply carry over their current elections into the new year. I suppose this is fine, assuming that they didn't make any mistakes initially. But what if that's not the case? Then this inertia starts to jeopardize the individual's financial well-being down the road. It also sends a signal to the industry that initial participation rates are not going to significantly increase over time. And sometimes there's talk about, just kind of getting your foot in the door and then coming back for re-enrollments and signing up, hopefully, a lot of new employees. And while that may happen in some instances, when kind of left to their own devices, when it's more of a passive type arrangement being used, again, the employees usually just kind of carry over what they currently have, unless something's majorly has changed for them. Another challenge for the industry is that the employees often make up their mind about whether or not to buy before open enrollment occurs. We need to change our thinking a bit to account for this. We need to acknowledge that open enrollment is often when individuals execute their decisions, not make them. Also, employees come away from open enrollment confident that they made all the right choices. The figure on the right shows that most of our non-buyers believe that they made the right decision by declining CI or STD. This question was also asked early on before the discussions became more detailed. So when we asked them up front, we kind of introduced the topic of, or the concept of short-term disability or CI. I didn't get any details, but we said, we know that, this is available to you. How confident are you about not purchasing it? Most seem to think that they made the right choice. Employee decisions are also commonly made on misconceptions, and we saw this several times in our focus groups. The first quote ties short-term disability to a work-related injury, which would be covered by workers' comp. But many employees get confused by this. Some are unaware that coverage includes a leave for maternity. So while carriers design this as an income protection benefit, a majority of the individuals relate short-term disability with their health benefits, counting on its verbal association. This causes employees to base their decision on their personal risk assessment rather than on the actual benefit that the insurance provides. The second quote is from a person who didn't realize that CI pays a lump sum benefit that does not need to reimburse a specific medical expense. Another point of confusion that we see with CI is not knowing what's covered. We've heard several times from employees that it's critical illness, but what makes a condition critical? What defines whether or not it's critical? And normally there's, a very succinct list of covered conditions, but somewhere this got lost to Lance in our discussion. So there are the factors which hamper employee participation rates. Now that the stage is set, let's consider some common communication mistakes. As I mentioned previously, waiting until open enrollment does not work. It leads to analysis paralysis. Quote number one that you see was from a person who was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information they received at open enrollment. In quote two, Mei-Ling was offered several optional benefits, and she really struggled to distinguish them from one another. So she had a lot of choices. She couldn't make heads or tails of what each one did. And so she started to think that they were kind of repetitive, they overlapped. And in the end, she decided not to purchase any of these because she wasn't sure what to do. So she just decided to put it off. We also heard several examples of participants who said that their companies did a very poor job communicating their benefit options. Some feel that their employer is indifferent to their decision, and that really that their employer just wants to take credit for making a particular plan available to them. They really don't care whether or not they sign up. In the first quote, there's an example where there was a carrier rep that was invited to come on site, but when they did, the person really focused on the company's medical plan. And then one of the workers asked a specific question about short-term disability, and the rep offered them no help, and in fact referred them to the marketing materials, referred them to the paper pamphlets that were brought, really couldn't explain any of the nuances or even address a simple question from an employee. In the second quote, it gets a little bit worse. Even Kristen's company just sent an email to the workers to let them know that a rep would be available on site. But even more disturbing, she and her coworkers were required to clock out if they wanted to meet with this person. So they had to do it in their own time. They weren't getting paid for the meeting at all. And so if anyone's interested in this insurance, you can go ahead and meet with somebody to talk about it on your own time. Probably not, I can only assume that case did not generate a very high participation rate. It was of no surprise, really, to hear employees complain about the abstract terminology that's often used in communication materials. Even though short-term disability is available at her company, Alicia didn't understand the option until we provided her with it. We provided a definition to the group. And so she said that was the first time that she really understood it. And then she went on to explain that the lack of information she received at work made it easy for her to say no, and that this outcome would have been probably quite different had she not been left to fend for herself. So now we've looked at some bad examples of benefits communication. Now let's consider some ways for the industry to improve. We've seen that waiting till the open enrollment period is a recipe for disaster. It's simply too late at that point to generate interest. Interest in optional benefits must be generated well ahead of time in employees' mind. Now, I'm not suggesting to overwhelm employees with all the details in advance, but rather just try to capture their attention. Now, how can this be done? I'd argue that in as many ways as possible, using both traditional and creative methods. Let's look at some of the suggestions that our focus group participants had for us. The first quote suggests using an early approach, emphasizing the coverage in the weeks leading up to the open enrollment. That's really the crucial time to get these optional benefits into employees' minds. Otherwise, they're not going to really think much about their optional choices, and that makes it very easy to say no when they have the opportunity to buy. The second quote from Matthew stresses that with email, that it's really crucial to quickly capture the recipient's attention. I'm sure we can all relate to this, getting many, many emails, and forget it if you're out for a day from work, all of a sudden you have 30, 40 messages waiting in your inbox. So you start prioritizing, and you can also quickly delete things that you don't really think are applicable or don't need your attention. So if you don't really going back to the quote, Matthew saying that if you don't catch my attention right away, it's going to go in the spam folder or it's going to get deleted very quickly. A key finding of our research is that the employees need to connect emotionally and psychologically with an available benefit before they're willing to learn the details of coverage. The analytical connection comes later. It's a distinct step that's made late in the shopping process. So you basically need to capture their attention and make them interested, then make them want to learn more. How can you capture employees' interest? Real life scenarios and testimonials show great appeal. Employees want to know what's in it for them. Most people know someone who has faced a disability or has gone through a life-changing illness. they quite likely noticed how the person's family was impacted, and they can appreciate how if the person didn't have coverage, and we know that a lot of people don't take these optional benefits if they're even available, they can still relate and see that, I wonder if that person had this extra money, that would have helped the person and their family considerably. It's also crucial at this stage for carriers to start breaking down people's seemingly inherent distrust of insurance companies. The employees we talk to, and I've heard this in other focus group discussions too, when it comes to insurance companies, they worry about legalese. They worry that there's going to be small print in the contract, and should they come to need to make a claim down the road, that the insurance company is going to kind of pull the wool over their eyes and find a way to deny the claim. So I think when we're trying to establish these emotional and intellectual connections to kind of capture their interest, it's also a good time to start chipping away at this and trying to find ways to build a little bit of trust with prospects. Here are some suggestions on the types of communications that employees feel would be effective. The first quote's from a younger participant. She feels like that millennials like her can't relate to the concept of short-term disabilities. So carriers need to better demonstrate how this product can assist workers of all ages. I mentioned before the whole maternity benefit, where some employees don't even understand that that's in there. So that's something that needs to be highlighted. Quote number 2 recommends using testimonials. While people don't want to acknowledge they're at risk for a disability or an illness, they, inside their head and based on their experience with others, they know that they're not immune. And learning how short-term disability or CI coverage really helps someone similar to themselves in their time of need can go a long way in helping them understand why the coverage, why they might have a need for the coverage, why it might be a good fit for them. Our third participant here, he's looking for details. Now, he's asking for a lot of details, saying that specific details of everything. Not everyone is going to read the fine print. That's definitely true. But I do think most people want to know where they can find it, should they need to locate it. Again, I think it's really crucial to first capture their interest, but once you have kind of a captive audience and the people are looking for more information, you take the captive prospects and you show them where they can find the details, should they be interested in doing so. Employees are going to pay more attention when the information presented is in layman's terms. The industry often uses confusing jargon. Think about it, we kind of become numb to it in the course of our jobs, but it's a major obstacle in reaching consumers. We throw around terms. I'm even doing it a little bit in this presentation, saying STD and CI. We talk about elimination periods, pre-X's, subsequent occurrences. To a consumer, this really has them scratching their heads. And while many of our benefits are designed to assist employees in dire times, employees definitely don't respond well to fear tactics. So as much as possible, try to keep the initial messages light. That theme's really captured in our first quote, as Stefan suggests that using the lighter approaches. Note that he acknowledges that optional benefits assist in trying situations. So of course you must use some sort of balanced messaging. It can't all be light, but it also, they don't want it to be too serious as well. Again, a balanced approach would probably work best. The second quote touches on some of the earlier themes, but really stresses the importance of making the need for short-term disability, critical illness, or other optional benefits related to the individual. Keep in mind that employees often don't see the need because they feel that they're already covered by their major medical plan. So it's up to the carriers and the brokers they work with, whoever's even the employer, whoever's doing the communication, to really help them see where the gaps are in their coverages. Now, today we have a very diverse workforce. So you're marketing to employees of all different backgrounds and histories, different ages, and that really reinforces the need for carriers to use multiple strategies. No single type of message is going to effectively resonate with all. We've seen now with online enrollments have become more prevalent than using paper, though both approaches are still very, very common. So you need to balance the delivery of communications given in advance. We know that there's a low use of technology for employee communication, and though employees have high interest in these tools, and those who use them have high satisfaction. That's from some of our other LIMRA research. We also know that online marketing materials are popular with brokers. In our recent study, 88% said they have access to these, and 3 in 4 of those use the capacity. Also, those who don't have access, so that just the 12% that say that they didn't have access to online marketing materials, most of them wish they did have access. Brokers see social media campaigns lacking, and they rated the carriers very, very poor at using social media to generate interest in their products. However, brokers also acknowledge that they're not much more effective at doing this themselves. They said, I think about 20% said that carriers do a fairly adequate job of generating interest via social media, and I think the percentage for themselves was somewhere about 10 percentage points higher, about 28 to 30%, something like that. So there's a lot that the industry can do to improve social media marketing. And employees, even millennials, find great value in face-to-face meetings, especially for optional benefits that they don't understand very well, and they find that it's very helpful to talk with somebody. One-on-one meetings are considered more useful than group meetings by both employers and employees. And part of the reason for that is the group meetings often fail to discuss the optional benefits, like the quote we talked about a few minutes ago, where the rep referred the audience back to the marketing materials. So a couple more quotes here for you, and the first one emphasizes the importance of personal benefits counseling, and also points out that some people aren't comfortable discussing the specifics, their personal specifics, in a group setting of their peers. So they really want to talk one-on-one so that they can make sure that their personal concerns are addressed. In the second quote, Jonathan's calling for more information being made available via social media. In his mind, all benefit communication should reference and link back to a Facebook page where employees can access plan specifics on demand. Again, I don't think everybody's going to go do this. I don't think that most people are going to go do this, but I think that many would feel better knowing that, okay, if I have questions, if I need the specifics, okay, I can just go to this social media page and there's the links to everything I need. I can kind of do it myself, and then I'll seek out personal assistance from HR or call a phone number, get help in another way if I don't understand it. But at least let me try to resolve the questions myself. Ultimately, our biggest takeaway from this research project was that employees do recognize the importance of optional benefits. Even though they were initially very confident that they made the right decision to not buy, many were much more interested after they participated in our discussion. Our participants offered some creative, non-conventional ideas on ways to communicate benefit options. I think that carriers should experiment. There's definitely no silver bullet, but many of the suggestions we heard are practical ways to generate additional interest among employees. Now, I realize not every company is going to try the same strategy, and not every, you're going to have to kind of experiment and then go from there and see what works, what doesn't, and fine tune your strategies. But definitely be open to new ways of communication and getting employees to better understand their optional benefits. These final quotes show you in participants' own words that many are looking for another opportunity. Unfortunately, mandating focus group attendance for all employees would be very complicated and quite an expensive task. So I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon. What we need is the industry to do a better job of stimulating interest, and that way higher participation rates will surely follow. That is the end of my presentation. As the video mentioned and up here, LIMRA members have access to a report, Reworking Your Strategy, that contains all this information. There's even some additional quotes from employees are part of the report. And before I open it up to Q&A, I just wanted to mention this webinar was originally designed to be a presentation for a supplemental benefit committee. LIMRA is hosting a supplemental health, DI, and long-term care conference this August in San Diego. So we hope that you would if you have some interest in that, definitely touch base with me. I can get you over to some colleagues who will give you some more information about it. But we would love to have you join us in San Diego. That brings me to the end of my materials. Actually, go back to kind of the report slide, and we can certainly open up for question and answers.
Now, since we have everyone on mute, I've asked that you submit questions by the chat feature. Feel free to write them in. And I'll give a minute or two for that, but we have received one question, Ron. It is, the employees suggest some unconventional communication methods, such as using billboards. Can you elaborate on what's behind these ideas?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, actually, billboards had us scratching our heads a little bit at first, but once the employees started talking a little bit more about it, it made sense. Basically, they're saying, and this is for kind of the initial communication, the way to just kind of spark their interest. Basically, they'd like to saying, maybe hit us at a time where we're kind of stuck. We don't have anything better to do. We're stuck in traffic, and then I'll see a billboard for maybe a carrier or benefit, something that might capture my interest, and maybe that'll just get me thinking about it a little bit. So something related that they mentioned that went along with billboards was doctors or dentist offices. Really, any time where they're kind of idle, and saying that that would be a good time to just kind of get the concept into my mind, and that might spark some curiosity, and then I'll be more curious once I have the opportunity to learn more.
Very good. Next question is, what method for enrollment was included in this study? Self-service, enroller assisted, etc.
There wasn't a specific list of enrollment methods included. Basically, the criteria we wanted was we were looking to talk to employees who had access to either optional short-term disability or critical illness. And we always use the word optional too. We didn't want to restrict it to 100% employee paid, because we know that sometimes employers will contribute to the coverage, but the employee still has some skin in the game and has to elect the benefit and pay for it. So as far as signing up, we didn't ask about that too much ahead of time as far as what type of meetings were you presented with, but it was a big part of the discussion we had when we started to ask about how does your employer communicate benefits to you. And in the discussions, we would start off very general, not get into specific benefits until later when we were focusing on the topic of interest, either the CI or the SDD. So we heard a lot of different things. So, some people were completely left to their own devices, and most who were in that camp were frustrated from it. But others said that their companies, their human resources, did a really good job and they got all the information they need. But by and large, I would say that employees probably rated their employer communications C- at best. There were I would say more leaning towards unhappy or confused than people who were satisfied and felt that they understood everything.
Mm-hmm. Are you ready for the next question?
Sure. I was just going to say, hopefully that addressed the question.
Great. Are there any differences based on age, and what ages were the focus group participants?
We basically tried to get a mix of people. We wanted to get it as broad as possible. And actually in the report, we do, for each quote, we tell you the person's name and which age group they were in. But we intentionally recruited to have a broad representation, and that was part of the allure of doing the online focus groups, is we didn't have to go, pick a couple cities and focus on people from those cities, because everybody attended via an online portal. So we were able to get a good mix of ages as well as people from all different states.
Okay. The next couple. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to add that though the younger people were definitely more inclined to, have the feeling of invincibility. I don't need that. People my age don't need to worry about that. And when we asked them about who would need it, people, who would be a good person to consider these coverages, they of course said, somebody older than me who has health conditions should be the ones looking into these. And obviously, we as the industry, we want to have a good broad sample to ensure we don't want to risk adverse selection. But in the younger people's minds, there was much more of an attitude of, well, this doesn't apply to me. But I will say, after sitting through the discussion, they were much more intrigued about the benefit options, though, and understood why they might need it. It's just unfortunate that employers can't spend as much time as, a 60 to 90 minute focus group discussion can, delving into specifics.
Mm-hmm.
Were there more questions, Audrey?
Yes. The next couple all kind of address the new technologies. So I'm going to put them all out there and let you kind of, I think the answers will address them, I think, at the same time. So we've got, where do you see the voluntary benefits market going with regard to participation via enrollment and use of new technologies such as video coaching, AI, and chat? Do you see these new technologies as methods to improve participation and grow interest in voluntary benefits? And in your survey, what level of interest was there for mobile engagement pre-enrollment? Any insight on how much was enough or too much?
Okay. As far as the different tools, as far as increasing participation, I think they have the potential to increase participation if done right. When you have benefits that employees don't understand well, when they're left to their own devices or left to do it in a setting that's more of self-service, I think that oftentimes is going to hurt participation rates, because they want somebody to talk to, somebody to ask questions to get and talk about their specific needs. However, I do think that technology allows carriers to reach employers that would be very difficult to meet with all employees individually, or even offer optional one-on-one type settings. So it can be a way to get voluntary benefits in front of employees and employers that would otherwise probably not have access to. And I think if the technologies are used the right way and in combination as a part of a strategy rather than kind of the sole strategy, I think that that there is potential to increase participation. I know a lot of times that in our broker study, we asked about online. I mentioned that online is used more than paper now. And the takeaway from that was that it was slightly more prevalent, but when we asked whether it was a self-service technology versus something that the broker, a system that captured the information, but the broker sat with the employee and, walked them through it and signed up with them, that was more prevalent. So even though online is, we'll say, 45 to 50% of the enrollments we saw, the majority of them at this point weren't self-service, though that certainly is used in some situations. And Audrey, what was the second question?
What the level of interest there was for mobile engagement pre-enrollment. How much is enough or too much?
I think that there's definitely some, and I think carriers need to find a way. Again, it's not going to be a one-size-fit-all approach, but a way to incorporate that into your strategy. I know that can get tricky with employers. Like they're probably not going to want to give you their employees' numbers to text them if they even have their, they may not have all of their mobile numbers as well. So there are some privacy considerations that have to be addressed. But I think it is an important way to build, to continue to incorporate. And I think as time goes on, employees are just going to expect more and more mobile engagement. Mm-hmm. There was also something earlier that I forgot to address about, I think one of the earlier options was about web chat. And I think there is some potential for that, though definitely people have mixed feelings about that. In some studies we've done, the web chat's definitely one of the, if not the least available web-based tool or service that employers, employees, and brokers all can use. And when it is used, when it's available, there's usually kind of mediocre usage. And when we ask the people who don't have it, would you be interested in it? It's usually kind of split, where some of the other tools, if you don't have it, like 80% or 90% are saying, yeah, I'd like to have it. When it comes to web chat, at this stage, it's still kind of lukewarm at best.
Okay, moving on to the out-of-cycle enrollment. Do you have any insight on the effectiveness of out-of-cycle enrollment for optional benefits? Your research seems to indicate that there's way too much noise during the traditional open enrollment period.
Right. I think I've always felt that ideally that would be a great way to do it. And there's been talk of off-cycle enrollments for voluntary or optional benefits for a long time now. I know when you ask we've asked employers and employees about it in various surveys, and they're usually pretty split on it. Especially the employers are kind of split, and I think the employees more often than not, and we actually asked about it in the focus group discussions a little bit too, they don't like the concept. I think it's because they don't like benefit enrollment time to begin with. I mean, there's all sorts of different studies saying how people prefer going to the dentist over enrolling in their benefits and things along those nature. Maybe it's just the whole concept of, I don't like doing it to begin with. So when I'm going to do it, let's get it over with and let's do it all at once. But I think that it would be certainly more effective to find ways to try to do an off-cycle enrollment as much as possible, because that way you're hopefully going to have a more captive audience, because medical and retirement options, things like that, are already taken care of. And now hopefully you can hone in on one or even say 3 or 4 different optional benefits, but something that the employee's much less familiar with. And if you're able to capture their attention at a different time, I think more would appreciate the need for the coverages. But I think you will get pushback. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try for it, but it's also not everybody's going to be welcoming it. All the customers are going to be welcoming it with open arms.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our last question is the following. Most material we've seen for enrollments are very bland or even brochure-like. What are your thoughts on providing a more upbeat video explanation and information and remove the lingo from the industry?
think it sounds fantastic. I think that's a lot of what our focus group participants were talking about, and a lot of the things they want things that are more catchy, more relatable to them, more personalized, and yeah, they don't like the legalese, they don't like the acronyms, the lingo, the things that they feel like I'm never going to understand this, and it just kind of makes them put a wall up, from the get-go. So that sounds like an excellent idea. And again, I don't know that there's an easy way to do it, but I think that, without spending too much money, carriers can kind of experiment a bit. And once you kind of come across something that seems to be working, fine tune, and maybe it works for one segment, but not another. So I think a lot of experimentation needs to be done, but that doesn't mean you necessarily need to sink a whole lot of money into it.
Okay, well, great. Those are all the questions we had. Do you have any concluding thoughts, Ron, or are you ready to close out for today?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, if people have additional questions, they can certainly contact me. I'll give them as much information as I can, and can certainly point any LIMRA member to the report. I noticed, at least on my end, when we were showing the video, there were some issues with it up front. That is available. Any member or non-member can see that, so I can certainly pass the link to that to anyone who's interested as well. Just a nice little 2-minute overview of the study.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, thank you, Ron. That's it for today. Like he said, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to him or to us at lic@loma.org. And thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to your participation next time. And if you'd like to see all of LIC's upcoming events, take a look at www.loma.org/LIC. Have a great afternoon and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.